Luke Cicilano is an experienced software developer. In this video, he has a discussion with Mark Gray, who is an experienced career coach. They give advice for people considering a career as a developer.
Hi, my name is Luke Cicilano. I'm a self-employed web developer. I'm also someone who employs other developers and has for some time. I recently had the pleasure of interviewing Mark Gray. Mark Gray is the founder and owner of Odyssey College Prep, and amongst other things, he has extensive experience in performing aptitude tests and career assessments and doing a lot of career coaching with people. And what this means is he essentially helps people figure out what it is they might be good at, what it is they might like to enjoy in terms of a career, and really he goes a long way in terms of helping people pick a path as they're figuring out what it is they want to do with their life. In this video that we're about to watch and the accompanying article that goes with it, what you're going to see is a discussion about whether or not someone should become a software developer at all. And in that part of the discussion, we're breaking it up into whether or not becoming a developer slash programmer is something that you would potentially enjoy, and would it be something that you're good at. And assuming that you would enjoy it, and B, you would be good at it, we're going to look at C, which is what particular field in development might be best for you. So assuming that you decide that development is for you, after we go through those things, we're going to look at different career possibilities, salaries that goes with those careers, as well as current job openings as of early April 2022. And I think you'll see that this is a field with a lot of possibility for somebody picking a career. And then after that, we're going to look at what it is someone should be thinking about when they're going out and looking for a job, and specifically how to interview. Interviewing for a job is something that makes a lot of people nervous, and also is something that a lot of people struggle with. So we'll be talking about some do's and don'ts about how to go about interviewing. So I think this is going to be a really useful video for people that are on the fence about whether or not they should learn to code, whether or not they should become a developer, whether or not they should become a programmer. It's also really going to help somebody go into a coding curriculum like Free Code Camp with a bit of a roadmap in mind in terms of what is it they might be interested in, what is it they might like to do, what kind of job possibilities might they have once they're done, and then how are they going to go about interviewing. So with all that said, let's get to the interview and hopefully provide you with some useful information. Okay, we're really lucky to be joined by Mark Gray. Mark is the founder and owner of Odyssey College Prep. They, among other things, help kids and help individuals with figuring out what their aptitudes are, meaning what careers might they be good at, as well as deciding what careers they should go into. He has a lot of experience administering career assessments, doing career coaching, and also administering aptitude tests. Mark, how many kids and just individuals in general would you say you've helped with career assessments and aptitude testing over the years?
I'd probably say we're about at 200, probably.
200. Okay. All right. Very good. And the goal of this talk today, and thank you for joining us, by the way. I know you're busy.
No, thanks.
The goal of this talk today is to kind of speak to those people that are, wondering if they should learn to code, if they should become a programmer, if they should become a software developer. And what I really want to do in this interview is, use your background to answer three basic questions. One of them being, should someone become a developer at all? In other words, is it for them? And also understanding the importance of picking a career choice that fits, someone's personality and aptitudes. And then we'll kind of get into a little bit about if somebody should be a developer, what careers and salaries might be available for them. And then let's get into how to look for a job and how to interview, specifically how to interview for a job, which for reasons beyond my understanding, quite a few people aren't good at. So we're not taking too long. Let's just kind of dive right into the question of, should someone learn to code? Should someone become a developer?
Yes.
Should someone become a programmer? I think everybody should, but a lot of people get intimidated by it. One big thing I think that's really important in answering any kind of career question, but especially, if somebody's going to go into something that's technical in nature, like being a developer, is I think way too many people just say X pays well, I'm going to go try to do X, or X looks cool, I think I'm going to go try to do X. And they don't stop to think of, is it actually a good career choice for them as a human or not? Um, so really, I think the first threshold of deciding whether or not someone should be a developer is whether or not they're even going to like it, because life can be really problematic if somebody hates their job. Can you really briefly, in your experiences, as doing career coaching, can you talk about the importance of why is it so important to actually like what you do, and B, why do so many people not think about, well, I actually like doing this before picking a career path?
You bet. So first off, the first thing you said, choosing a job that pays well and that sounds good, that is a huge problem. And when you think about it, I mean, a lot of the high school kids that I work with and some of the college students we work with, they probably spent more time picking out what they were going to wear to prom, right? Than like actually thinking about if the career or the college major that they're picking is a good fit for them. So I think that's super important, just to make time to actually like think and meditate on those things. I would say, as far as like picking something you like, that's a tricky thing for a lot of young people, because like, you don't know what you don't know, right? You don't have experience doing those things, so how can you know if you'll like a career in them? But there are certain things that I would say start with, what have you enjoyed doing professionally thus far, right? So like, take for example, I had one client and she was the manager for her track team. And the coach, she saw while working with the coach that they weren't tracking any data like on how fast kids were, really, except for on races. So, proactively, she made a spreadsheet and started creating this database, right? And now on every practice, she had times for every single, athlete on that team. That says something, right? And like, she enjoyed it, right? She loved it. So, she's now, I think, at the University of Mississippi, majoring in computer science, but data analytics is really what she's focusing on, because she's had experience doing that and she really enjoyed it. So I think starting by like identifying the things that you enjoy, and then finding like professional equivalents of those that you could, use to kind of chart the course of your career.
Okay. I think that's something a lot of people really overcomplicate, because I've had, just because I've done some kind of career oriented videos, and I've had people ask me, about like career paths and, and things of that sort. And what you just said about find something you enjoy and then ask what's the professional equivalent of that. And I've had some people, I've said something like that to people, and they've said, well, how do I know what I like to do? And I just kind of look at them and I say, well, what do you like to do? I mean, It really is just ask yourself, what do you like to do? And if you can find the professional equivalent of that, go do it. I don't think it's a hard question. But
it's not the GRE, right?
Yeah. But for some reason, though, people like just really get worried about that. And you can find, a lot of times people can find things that they enjoy that have a professional equivalent. So, so what we're saying is that if somebody can find a career field in development that has a professional equivalent to what it is they enjoy to do in their just own time or as a hobby or whatever, you're saying that's something, it might be a good fit, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, because like if they've had the energy and some genuine excitement to do it in the past, there's a very good chance they'll continue to gain a lot of fulfillment from that. And that's one of the primary reasons why you should pick something. Like, I think the words you used was, pick something you like, pick something you enjoy, right? If we pick something we're interested in, interests are kind of like fuel, right? You take someone who's overworked, underpaid, stressed out, but all of a sudden, if you put something in their schedule, whether it's a hobby or like a side hustle or a part-time job, and they actually enjoy that task, right? That job or that hobby, they'll find that they have more energy to do other things, right? On the flip side, if you pick, I'm going to major in computer science and be an app developer because on Jobs Indeed it pays well. You may wind up at a job that you hate that is sucking your energy and soul out, right? Just because, that's easily avoidable. Just if you had a little bit of forethought and again, connected it to something you've enjoyed in the past, you're probably going to continue enjoying doing that thing.
And on the flip side of that, what happens when somebody gets in that career that, like you said, just sucks all their energy out? I mean, how successful are they going to? I mean, the answer to this should be obvious, but what happens when people go into a career for the wrong reasons and wind up not liking it? How likely are they to stay in that career for any length of time?
Sure. So I think there's I don't know if it's a misattributed quote. Pick a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life, right? Well, I like my job, but I get stressed out plenty at work, and it's good though, right? Like it's challenging, right? Because I enjoy what I do. But if you take someone who hates what they do, right, and not only hates it, but like they don't really have a natural aptitude for it, like they're just not naturally wired to excel in situations like that. It's very hard to compartmentalize that frustration in just your job. In other words, it's going to start waterfalling and spilling into other parts of your life. If you're upset at work, you're going to go home upset. Right. When you're hanging out with your family and friends, you're going to be a stick in the mud. It's just, it can quite frankly, like ruin your life, right?
So the person that hates their job might wind up also being the person with an ex-spouse and
right, yeah,
and only seeing their child half the time because it ruins their marriage and everything else, right?
Well, they're spending more time. I mean, I love my wife, right? But I spend more time at work than I do, hanging out with her, like most people do, right? So it makes sense. There's no way that it couldn't either enhance or really diminish the other parts of your life.
Right. It's just not possible.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So, I mean, so if we get past that first part and somebody says, okay, I think there are things that align with my interests that would work well as a developer, as a programmer. So that might be a good career path for me based on my personality type. It's also important that they be have the potential to be a good developer or programmer, right? Because something might be very interesting to you, but if you're never going to be good at it, then it tends to get frustrating, really fast. I mean, there are lots of things I like that I know I'm just horrible at them, so I don't spend much time doing them.
Right.
So assuming somebody can get over that first threshold and say, yeah, this might be a career for me, we need to really look at it fits your personality, but does it fit your ability level? Does it fit your skill set? Mm-hmm. Is this something you have the capability to do? And you and I talked a little bit off camera about some people might have natural aptitudes mm-hmm. that say, hey, this person will be a good programmer, this person will be a good developer. But if somebody doesn't have the aptitude, they might still have the ability to learn and still excel that way. Can you talk about what you mean by that a little bit?
You bet. So one of the first things I tell our clients before we administer this advanced aptitude test that we use is that like an aptitude test is not an IQ test, right? We're not measuring how smart they are. Aptitudes, and I liked how you differentiated them earlier between, you said abilities versus skills, right? And so aptitudes or abilities are just ways that your brain is wired that make certain tasks easier to do. Right. So like take, for example, and I bet you're like this, right? Like you love solving problems, right? Like you wake up and, hey, what can I fix? Right. ER doctors often have that, we call it classification, the aptitude is. So when someone has a really high classification, they need problems to solve, right? And when you think of an ER doctor, right, their day never looks the same.
Right.
They could be patching up a bullet wound or like doing a surgery or, if someone's really high in that, they're going to have an easier time diagnosing and treating problems. But let's say you take someone who's really low in that ability, they're going to have a tougher time. They need more experience under their belt before they have the natural fluency that someone who's really high in that ability would.
Okay.
So it's not that if you don't have set aptitude, you're going to be bad at this. It just means that certain tasks will be easier and certain tasks won't be. And if you don't have an aptitude in something, because no one is going to have, if you get hired for a job, you're not going to be good at everything naturally, right?
Right.
That's where skill comes in. So aptitudes or abilities, we come pre-programmed with them. They're in our brains. They typically don't change. Skills are things that we learn how to do, right? You may have a gift to learn languages, but you don't emerge into the world knowing French and Italian, right? You learn that, and the more you do it, the better you get. The less you do it, the worse you get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what you lack in an ability or an aptitude, you can always make up for with a high skill. And that's where prodigies come in. If you have the aptitude and you have a high skill, that's where, like, the Beethovens of the world come in.
Saying is, if I'm hearing you right, is skill comes from learning and repetition.
Mhm.
And I would think to a certain extent, or I wouldn't even say certain, to a big extent, somebody who's really putting in the time, really busting their butt, really trying to learn, versus, but with a low aptitude for, say, like technical problems, versus that person's got a high aptitude for technical problems, but just doesn't put in the work in terms of, trying to become a better developer. That person who's just coding every day and like working on their problem solving every day and things of that nature, after a while, they're going to surpass that person with the high aptitude who's just not putting in the time. So in other words, if you don't, is it fair to say that if you don't have a high aptitude, you can still be one of the really high performers? You just got to work a little harder to get there.
Right, absolutely. And see, that goes back to the point you first made. People are not going to devote their time to do that if they don't care about it. Right. So
Right.
if you're interested in this, like take for example, so my aptitude abilities, right? I have very little like visual artistic talent,
Mm-hmm.
right? But in my spare time, I paint, right? I have had to learn skill to do that. I enjoy it. It's worth the time putting into it, right? Not everyone will have the interest in doing that, and therefore it might not be worth the time.
Okay. Yeah. So really, if it's putting all this together, if somebody can find a career path in development that fits into an interest or a hobby or something that they would enjoy or care about, most of the time, even if they don't have all that natural aptitude towards something, they can learn their way into being good at it through repetition
Absolutely.
and practice. And then if somebody finds something they're really passionate about and they're willing to put in that time and they have a high aptitude for it, then that's that in development, and that's that person who's going to take over the world, so to speak.
Right. I mean, like, I had very little desire to learn how to code
Mm-hmm.
before you and I met, right? But now, so much of, now that we're getting clients coming in on our website, now I'm like, it'd be really kind of nice to learn HTML, right? I have interest for it now, right? And so, I'm like, I think I just finished the first module on the Free Code Camp HTML, course, and I'm interested in it. It's fun. I don't have much natural talent in it, but I like it and I'm learning and it's great. But 3 years ago, I would not have made the time to do that,
Right.
because it wasn't relevant to me.
Okay. So assuming somebody meets these first couple of tests we've talked about, fits their personality, they've either got an aptitude that they're going to develop or they're just going to put in the time and learn it. Let's talk about some specific careers that, because somebody's saying, hey, should I learn to code? Well, okay, now they know that, yes, it might interest them. Yes, they can either learn it or they have an aptitude about it, but they still got to figure out what might be a good career for them. And they also might not know which area of development they would necessarily be good at, right?
Right.
So if somebody is, for example, thinking of maybe becoming a front end developer, what are some skills or traits that might fit into that for somebody.
Okay, so the cool thing about aptitudes or abilities is that, like, as we discussed earlier, skills will eventually kind of become more of a priority, right, than the natural talent. However, if you're high in an aptitude, it'll push to be used, right? So, like, take someone like you who likes solving problems. You're going to find problems to solve, right? That's just a part of your makeup, right? So there's one ability, going back to your question, front end developing, there's one ability called design memory. It's a person's ability to remember images, right? And so these people are naturally kind of drawn to the way things look.
Okay.
Right. There's another ability called spatial relations theory. We call it SRT because it's a mouthful. Essentially, it's how you're able to connect other systems together. So people with a low SRT, they do better with specializing in a part of a system. People with a high SRT, they are really good at making sure all of those things are connecting together.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
So really, you're talking about the ability to see how is somebody, if somebody's looking at this part, how likely are they to interact with this other part of a front page or something like that? Is kind of what you're saying.
You bet. And that is that aptitude. That's more of a general one that we find is really common in people that work in technology or just basically in the computer sciences in general. But it's not just how one ability works, but how they all kind of work together. So if you have someone who has a high SRT who's really good at envisioning how systems connect and work together, but then they also have a high design memory, you have someone who's very interested in interconnected systems in the way that they appear to other people, right? Like the visual components to them. Does that answer your question?
No, it does. So really, if I'm somebody who I'm wondering if I should learn to code, and I'm pretty good about thinking in terms of how does a collection of parts work together, and I'm also pretty good, as you said, at like remembering photos, remembering what things look like, and like things of that nature. That's somebody who might be a good fit for essentially like doing front end development, which is dealing with essentially what the customer sees when they're looking at a website or an application.
Absolutely. Right. Another way to kind of tell if that's, other than taking the assessment and like knowing for sure, one way to look back is to think, how particular are you about the way things look? Right? Like do you spend are you that guy or gal in a speech class who really hones in on the PowerPoint presentation, right? Additionally, a lot of artists naturally have a high design memory if you really enjoyed art. As far as the SRT, like how things connect, so there's some correlation with people that are really good or have an affinity towards advanced math, typically have a high SRT. You don't always have to, but and then additionally, a lot of politicians actually have a high SRT, because when you're talking about systems interconnecting, that's essentially your ability to sort of imagine how something would work out if you did something this way, right? Which is what you do, for front end web developing. If I put this here, will the user be able to see it and do it and get what they need from it?
Okay. So those are some traits that might fit. So if somebody's asking themselves, should I learn to code? And they can say, hey, I have those traits that Mark just talked about. Doing work on the front end might be a good career path for them. Like, correct. In other words, in terms of like their personality or skills. Okay. What about if somebody's wanted to do work more on like the back end of things, like in other words, building the actual applications that are like running through the front end? Like for example, like building like the calculators and the numerators and those kinds of things on the back.
Okay. Would analytics be a part of that as well?
It could be.
Okay.
Definitely in the use of it. Yeah.
Gotcha. So typically when you're dealing with things that are really heavy in statistics, right? Or data, there's one ability called number memory. And it actually has nothing to do with how good you are at math. It's just your ability to remember long sequences of information,
Mhm.
right? And also there's a neat correlation to this. People that are really high in this are typically really good at trivia. They're just randomly good at knowing weird random stuff, right?
Mhm.
Which, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, a lot of coding is that, right? It's conjuring facts, concrete facts about what something does and doesn't do. So someone on the back end, again, high SRT helps because you're connecting systems, but also an ability to remember long sequences of numbers and how numbers and statistics relate to each other. Uh, Finally, there is another ability. So we have SRT, spatial relations theory, and the other one, SRV, spatial relations visualization. So people that are really high in SRV, they typically gravitate toward careers that involve one or two things. One, where they're actually like touching the thing that their job centers around, right? So like a lot of mechanical, chemical engineers often have a high SRV. And then additionally, architects do. Most people that work in technology that I've encountered usually have a high SRV as well. Now, if you're not dealing with something that you can actually touch, right, then what you're dealing with is information that's very concrete. Okay, like so something that's not concrete, philosophy.
Mhm.
Something that is concrete, analytics on web traffic,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, and just
Um,
just data in general.
yeah, so having that mechanized mind where um, you may be good at thinking about abstract systems and how they work together, but when it comes down to it, when you're dealing with specific hard facts, people that gravitate towards that uh, may find that they have an affinity for the back end stuff.
Okay. So, and I mean, and obviously plenty of people can do both, but if you think,
Mhm.
if I'm hearing you right, if you're thinking I am somebody, I'm more artistically inclined, I really remember images, I really think of how colors work together, like those kinds of personality traits, you might be more suited for doing like front end type work. Somebody who, like you said, has that, you know, they can remember what their phone number was 25 years ago.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, just as an example, they can remember what their phone number was 25 years ago. Like you said, they can remember like long strings of sequences. They can look at a long string. I would think one big thing was they could look at a long string of sequences and just not be intimidated by it, which a lot of people, would be.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're not intimidated by large amounts of data, you can not just remember, but if you're not intimidated by it, doing more like back end kind of work, like might be like a good fit for you too, right?
Yeah, and that's another. This would be another general ability that would apply to almost, I believe, every career in coding or computer science is we call it visual speed or visual accuracy. Together, it's called visual dexterity. But think about how overwhelmed you get when you look at large bodies of text,
Right.
right? So visual speed naturally is, I mean, literally that. How fast do your eyeballs move when you read, right?
Hmm.
And your accurate visual accuracy is, do you need to get that premium subscription of Grammarly, right?
Right, right,
Can
right.
when you send an email, how many typos are there? So lots of editors naturally have a high visual accuracy. So um, you can be very few people are high in both.
Okay.
Uh, Most people that I know that work in technology, they have a really high visual speed
Okay.
because, which, when you think about it, I mean, I don't mean to simplify coding and everything that it is into one professional task, but you are looking at a lot of text, right?
Right, right.
So being able to, I love how you put it, not get intimidated by a large body of text,
Hmm.
or a sequence of code would also be really, really, really helpful. Again, if you're low on both of those, it just means it may take more time, energy, and effort for you to develop the skills to do it. Doesn't mean you can't, but it sure doesn't hurt.
Okay. All righty. And then other areas people might go into too, like for example, if they want to focus heavy on, just as an example, data visualization or something like that, where
Mhm.
you're really taking massive amounts of data and converting it into usable forms on the front end for consumers of that data. Um, and people that want to get into like information security, all these kinds of things, all of which Free Code Camp offers as curriculum, by the way. Um, and
Right.
those people they're still going to be falling into those same kinds of traits, right?
Mhm.
Because if you're going to get into like data visualization, for example, you'd better be really good at working with data, and you better not be intimidated by working with massive amounts of data, right?
Right.
Which is kind of the same thing. So I would think, so someone who's going to get into data visualization or do a lot of data visualization type work is probably somebody who's going to need to want to have both of those skills, right? Kind of what you talked about, that
Absolutely.
aesthetic slash thinking of the UI on the front end, thinking of how things work together from a user standpoint, but then also being able to work with like large amounts of data, large strings of numbers, not getting intimidated by that, like so on and so forth. So, right.
Yeah, and that's, sorry, were you finished?
No, yeah, I was. Go ahead.
Okay. And I would say with the data visualization, uh, this is also, I mean, experience helps you no matter what, but um, that is super important because people that are drawn to working with images, they're often very creative, right? Like
Mhm,
they enjoy doing, like, creating things that look good, right?
mhm.
Um, but typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, uh, a like a web developer, what they design and the way they make it look is probably not going to have the same aesthetic standards of a piece of art hanging up in a museum, right? Because
Right,
because it needs to actually do something, right?
right,
So it may take, even with training and certifications and stuff and with natural aptitude, that person is still going to need some experience or to be mentored by someone to make sure that the things that they're designing actually function in the real world in a way that's useful, in a way that gets them hired, right?
right, right. Okay. Alrighty. So really, where somebody, the kind of work somebody's going into, if I'm hearing you right, really just kind of comes down to, though, um, are they more of a artistic front end, thinking in terms of visuals, thinking in terms of images, thinking in terms of ease of use, things of that nature, whereas somebody that might be suited more for the back end kind of work is more about working with numbers, working with large amounts of data, not being intimidated by large amounts of data, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas and sometimes those people might be intimidated by something as simple as a color choice, which means, they might love working with large strings of numbers, but they definitely don't, but maybe they're not as suited, because for the front end work, because like I said, they might be intimidated by, well, do I use blue or red? Like
Right.
for a primary color. So, right. Um, okay. So really somebody just needs to look at those kinds of traits of that you just talked about in terms of deciding what kind of work do I want to do. Am I more of a user experience? Am I about thinking of how things go together? How easy is it to use? What's it look like artistically, so on and so forth, versus am I about putting together like large strings of information? And then that can kind of help guide somebody in terms of what kind of path they're looking at.
Correct. And again, the main issue of someone trying to figure out which one is just a lack of experience, right? You don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And while, job shadowing, or, I mean, goodness, there's a lot of videos on YouTube that show what it's like in the day of a X and Y. But also I mean, a lot of the courses that you guys offer that are free could give them a nice way to get their foot in the water to see how they like those things.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about free code camp is
It's free.
well yeah, the price is right for sure. And one of the great things about it is unlike a lot of other kind of online coding tutorials, you actually have to put together projects at the end of each course, so you can actually figure out if you like putting something together or not. Which is really, really important. So just going through the module can help someone understand, hey, this is or isn't for me. Um, okay, so All right. So assuming somebody has gone through and said, yes, this is for me, and now they've kind of looked at, maybe their own like skill sets, own personalities, own preferences, and figured out kind of what areas they might at least like to start exploring. I wanted to take a minute and talk about a few different career possibilities that I looked at. Uh, because, if somebody says, okay, yeah, I think being a developer aligns with my interests. I think I would enjoy it. I think I have the personality traits that go into being a front end developer. I think I have the personality traits that go into being an app developer, things of that sort. It's still important to get a job,
Right.
right? Jobs still
Yeah.
help. So if somebody's wondering in terms of if they should get into development and they're wondering what kind of job openings are available, I've got some numbers here that I pulled off of Indeed, and this is as of April 7th, 2022. Listed on Indeed, uh, there are 41,847 openings in the US for what would be considered a front end developer. And for someone, again, who is unaware of what that means, it's you're really working with the front end of the website or an application. You're working with what the customer's seeing on their end, putting together not just the aesthetics but the interactivity on that. To be a front end developer, you're really looking at needing to be fluent in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and I would say it really helps to be at least have a knowledge of the various front end libraries. Um, of those 41,847 jobs, 15,298 of them are remote, 5,779 of them are entry level, and 2,917 of them will start at $60,000 plus a year. In
Doesn't sound like a
terms,
bad gig.
no, it's not a bad gig at all. And the one thing to remember when you're looking at these kinds of careers is this is a field where a lot of times companies may say they want 1 year experience or 2 years experience. I mean, put your application in anyway and submit your resume, and you might be surprised at how fast you can get a call back. Two others I looked at on Indeed. Again, if somebody's wondering, can they get a job as a developer? If you want to, if you're a numbers person with front end skills and you want to get into assisting with data visualization, there are 79,000 jobs open according to Indeed. And again, this is really going to be about using your front end skills to present data, complex data in a digestible way. Just as an example, I've got a call recently from a geologist who needs to build an interactive website that allows people to essentially map out depletion rates of like different deposits and things of that nature, but then needs to spit that information out in a way that's usable for the person on the end. So if this is a field you're thinking of, if you're somebody that you've got those front end skills and you've got you're good at math, you're good at statistics, and you have a passion for those kinds of things, this might be something for you. So out of those 79,000 jobs, 24,000 of them are remote. Also, 24,000 of them start at about 65,000 plus a year, and about 11,000 of them are considered entry level. If you are considering being a back-end developer, which would be the person who builds the applications that just what sounds like runs on the back end of everything, you're looking at about 20,000 openings that could fall under that description. 1,800 of those being entry level, and about 8,600 of those starting at $85,000 a year. One thing I would say that's changed a lot, both about front end and back end development especially. If you're going to be a back end developer in today's world, you're going to be spending a lot of your time not building applications up from scratch yourself, but it's going to be more about like tying microservices together. In other words, using existing tools and writing some code to make them work together. So that's really what a back-end developer does today. And then there's quite a few other fields that someone can go into relating to security, data analysis, etc. But just those three career paths I just mentioned 110, 120, you got about 140,000 job openings in the US right now, just for those three types of jobs I just mentioned, with salaries all starting over $60,000 a year. So, all right. So getting on to the third part of our chat here. So assuming somebody has looked at, said, okay, coding might fit my personality. I either have an aptitude for it. I'm going to develop the skill in it. And they've figured out a path that might fit them. And now that they know that, yes, they can get a job doing this. One thing they've got to do once they complete, free code camp or whatever coding curriculum they're doing, is they need to go out and interview for a job. And I'm saying this from the concept or perspective of an employer. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that there seems to be a problem with people knowing how to interview for jobs today. And that's not me just saying that, based off my own anecdotal evidence and experience. That's something that, if you read CNBC or business news, that's something that gets complained about quite a bit. That a lack of interview skills and a lack of the kind of soft skills that go into an interview. So what kind of, so if somebody wants to go interview, I mean, they really need to, be prepared to present. What would you say are some of the big mistakes people make in job interviews, and what advice would you give to somebody who's going to interview for a job?
So, my wife tells me I use like 40 words when one will do. So, I think this is going to be one of those instances where I say perhaps a bit too much. So going back to what you initially said about soft skills, like what exactly those are, I would say those are more like social or behavioral habits, more so than like a skill, like learning how to like change a tire, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a behavioral habit. In other words, when I go to an interview, I'm going to always do X, Y, and Z. Always, every single time, right? So as far as mistakes that I see, because so it's interesting. I prep students for college interviews a lot and occasionally for internships, but I also hire people as well for our exam prep side. So I would say one of the biggest mistakes that I see is that a candidate or an applicant isn't communicating the problems that they're going to solve. Like, how are they going to make an employer's life easier, right? So a late Harvard business professor, he did some research on a restaurant on what kind of product or food they should give for breakfast, like this new food they were going to launch. And so he went to this restaurant and he talked to everyone that was leaving and asked them like why they got a certain food, right? And over the few weeks, they found that the milkshake was like the best food that people got, because one, it tasted good, two, it kept them full, and three, it took the entire commute to finish it, right? Mm-hmm. So essentially the restaurant's like, what job, or a customer's like, what job am I hiring this milkshake for? To keep me full, to give me something to do while I'm commuting, and it tastes good, right? And so I feel like if people that are going to interview for a job thought that way, like, what kind of problem am I going to solve for this person? And let's make the entire interview about me communicating that to them. That's the kind of value that I'm adding, as opposed to, I hope this person thinks I'm smart and that I look handsome or nice, and I hope that they like me. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, too often, and it's something I see a lot when I interview people, for positions, is people come in and have a way of either essentially reciting their resume to me, telling me, what they've done in terms of education, what they've done in experience. Well, first of all, I can read their resume.
I learned how to do that. Read.
I don't need them to sit there and recite it to me. But the other thing is, that doesn't really tell me what you just said. That doesn't tell me, hey, I'm the business owner. What are you going to do to make my business run better?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like that, it doesn't tell me that at all. So I think what you said is really important, just failing to think of it from the business owner's perspective, right? If you're someone coming in to interview, how do I wow this business owner and show them how I'm going to make the business run better? And that's just something that a lot of people don't tend to think about, like, at all on job interviews.
Yeah, if I'm allowed to give another pet peeve, it's the one of the ways they don't do that is they talk about themselves too much out of context, right? So like when you think of an interview, I think sometimes people think of their interview as like a 60-minute interview, right? Like the person who's asking the questions is like genuinely interested in them and want to know what like their favorite ice cream is and what their daily habits are, and just because they're so wonderful, But you can give fun, unique, personal information to someone interviewing you in the appropriate context, right? So like we often use this framework. It's not necessarily it's not applicable to every interview situation, but so like let's say you want to share the accomplishments that you've made your previous employer, right? You don't want to start out like you mentioned reading your resume. I've done this, and I've done this, right? But what if you said something to the effect of, I really love automating things and solving problems that make people's lives easier. Since I was young, I've been doing X, Y, and Z. Now all of a sudden I have a framework or a context that make my accomplishments make sense, right? Mm-hmm. This is me. This is what I love and I enjoy doing, and I love and enjoying doing it so much that I've done this, this, and this, and this, and this for my previous employers. I would love to do the same for you. Right. That's right. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. And I think one of the big things to go into that is, to be able to say, I enjoy this and tie it into the company is the first step of interviewing is take some time to learn about the company you're interviewing with. I mean, look at their website, look at, what is it they do? What kind of customers do they service? Who's their target customer? What kind of problems is the company trying to solve for people, et cetera, et cetera. And then wrap, like what you're saying, and that gives you something to wrap your personal traits, your personal experiences around it. That's where you get that context that you're talking about to provide to somebody. I mean, it kind of blows me away how often on an interview I'll ask somebody, did you look at our website? And they'll say no.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Which again, how can you learn anything about the company you're interviewing with if you're not even going to look at their website? So definitely, yeah, presenting yourself as someone who's going to provide value to the company, and I like what you said about wrapping it in that narrative of this is who I am, this is what I enjoy, this is what I do, but wrapping that in the context of how it's going to serve the company really, I think, is going to go a long way with a potential employer. I am lucky if 1 out of 20 people present themselves to me like that.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And these are people who are, I mean, technically qualified for the job. Like their resume is to where you think it's worth your time interviewing them, but then they don't prepare. Okay.
Yeah. I would say if I get 20 applicants, I would say 10 of them essentially want to read me their resume at an interview. Another 7 or 8 spend a lot of the interview kind of wanting to volunteer things about themselves, kind of what you were saying, that just aren't relevant to like the company, like at all. Yeah. And then, like I said, 1, maybe 2 might tie it into how they're going to be of benefit to the company. So, I mean, one really big thing is just listen to the questions your employer is asking you. And every single question they ask you, make it about how you're going to help the company. What do you do in your spare time? It's talk about enjoying activities you enjoy that align with the company, with what the company's trying to do. Like things of that nature. Just always find a way to turn the questions into something that's going to benefit the company. And I think that would really go, like a long way in any job interview. What any other interview tips you would give to somebody besides the obvious ones? Research the company in advance, show up on time. I think, what we just talked about in terms of how to present yourself is
Mhm.
probably one of the most valuable things people could do on an interview.
Yeah, and again, it's just I don't mean to wrap this in the generic adage of being prepared, just be prepared, right? But again, a lot of people think more about what they're going to wear to prom than how they're going to market themselves. And I work primarily with young professionals or high school students for their college interviews um, or internships that they're applying to. But for a lot of my clients, this is their first experience in self-marketing,
Hmm.
right? And so it's worth memorizing, right? It's worth sitting down, writing what you're going to say out, and like you don't need a robot like to be a robot. This is what I am now going to tell you, right? But it's worth rehearsing and just, I mean, think about how long a company will spend on thinking about their tagline, right? I
Oh yeah.
mean, it's no different if you're applying for a job. So I think just making time to rehearse and just showing up prepared. Heaven forbid showing up early. What do you say to people who show up late for their virtual interviews?
9 times out of 10, when somebody shows up late, they're actually showing up late and then asking to reschedule because they're so late. At that point, I just essentially tell them thanks, but no thanks. If somebody just shows up late, it's really, and they're not asking to reschedule, I would say it just kind of depends on, it's a case by case basis on whether or not we'll even do the interview or not. It just kind of depends, like at
Gotcha.
that point. But obviously, it's not a good look. Um,
Gotcha.
so yeah, I mean, just the basic things: do some research on the company you're interviewing with, show up on time, you know, ask questions about what your day is going to be like. If you're in a position to ask questions about what your day is going to be like at the job, and answer questions in the content with an answer of how you're going to provide value to the company. And if you do those things, you got a pretty good shot at getting hired.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So
That's a good checklist.
yeah. So okay. Well, listen, we really appreciate you coming on today. I think this has been really helpful in terms of why people need to like what they do, but also importantly, what kind of aptitudes and skills people might need to be thinking about in terms of whether or not development is going to be for them, and just everything else we talked about. I think it's going to be good for people.
I'm happy to be on here. Love what you guys do. So thank you.
All right. All right. Hey, thanks so much.